welcome to episode 84 of the Craft House Magic podcast. My name's Ellie and I'm coming to you from Norwich in Norfolk in the UK, and today's the 19th of September. So I hope you've all had a lovely crafty week since last time, and I'm here to share all the crafty things that I've been making in the last 7 days. So this week we have some knitting, some crochet, some sewing, some weaving and some confessions. As well as a bit of information on my shop update, which is this Friday. So you can find me on Instagram, Ravelry and Facebook as Craft House Magic, and I have my own website where you can find the show notes, which is on crafthhousemagic.co.uk, and I also have my handmade project bags, hand-dyed yarn, and also accessories like stitch markers, etc. We have a few craft alongs going on at the moment. We have the country garden knit along, which is going to go to the end of October, and it's basically knitting all my country garden patterns. I've got a sock pattern, a cowl pattern, a beret pattern and a mitten pattern. So if you're knitting on any of those, come and chat about it in the discussion thread, and once it's finished you can pop it in the FO thread. So anytime, actually, if you finished them a while ago, include them in the FO thread. I'm very happy for you to do that because they're all relatively recently released. So I'd love to see how yours looks finished. So next craft along is the festive craft along. So I've decided to change it from the Christmas craft along to the festive craft along to be a bit more inclusive of everybody. But anything sort of festive related, gift making, anything like that, if you come along, and we're just having a discussion thread for that so that we can sort of cheer each other on and get each other to sort of have new ideas and finish those projects that we want to get done for the festive season. So that's going to run till the 1st of January, and like I said, it's a discussion thread only, and I'll be drawing for prizes from the discussion thread. As always, I normally draw for prizes from a discussion thread and the FO thread as well. That counts for the country garden knit along as well. We have a Halloween craft along as well, so that'll be knitting and crochet Halloween themed items, and that'll run till the 1st of November because I'm in such a Halloween mood at the moment. I've already watched Hocus Pocus in the last week. I love that film, it's so good. I don't like things that are too scary, just a little bit, you know. So there's the craft alongs that we've got going on at the moment in the Ravelry group. We also have a Norwich meetup, which we've decided to call Barbara's Day Out. Although I'm not too sure whether I'm going to be taking Barbara with me because she's a bit heavy. So that's on the 6th of October at the Nelson's Hotel, and that's in Norwich City Centre, and it's 12 till 3, and I've booked a table. So if you are coming, if you just drop a message in the Ravelry group just to say that you're coming, just so that I have an idea of how many places I need to book for the table. That was a really nice meet-up last time, so I'm really looking forward to meeting up with everybody again. So, right, that's all the administration stuff. Let's get on to the good stuff. I have an FO in my knitting section. Woo! So I'd started the Pebbles and Pathways socks. I don't know, actually, I started them a little while ago and I got distracted by a number of other pairs of socks, but I finally got them finished. And they have a beautiful cable and a garter stitch detail on the front of the foot, and they are a toe-up sock, and they've got this really cool heel, which I am really impressed with how that fits. These are actually knitted for Adam, hence they're slightly longer than my sock blockers, but I wish I'd knit them for me now. I'll knit some more, I'm sure. So they are knitted in my own hand-dyed yarn in the Way You Make Me Feel colourway, and this is a BFL base. My BFL base is a slightly thicker fingering weight yarn, so I could get away with 60 stitches on this pattern. I normally go for 56 with my BFL base, but because there's cables on the front I had to go up a few stitches. I basically stuck to the pattern, apart from the stitch count, which was slightly different from how it was written, but I also ended up decreasing 4 stitches across the top here just before I got into the ribs section because of the stitch count I'd chosen. Basically, I won't go into details of what the pattern actually says because it's a paid for pattern, but I'm really impressed with how these knitted up. I'm definitely going to knit some of these again. And the pattern is by Mars from the Hey Brownberry podcast, and she's Marceline Smith. If you can pick that up off Ravelry, and they're called the Pebbles and Pathways socks. They're beautiful. So those are going to go in Adam's sock drawer after the podcast. So he's going to have probably about, I think it may be about 33 pairs of socks now. So I think he's probably got enough for a while. Although I just can't stop casting on new socks. Oh dear. So that's my finished object for this week. I've only got 2 projects to show you actually. So next on my needles in my knitting section is my Cozy Memories blanket. Now, stupidly, last night I decided to cast on another square, and I basically only picked up the stitches, and then the needles get in the way when I'm trying to show you them. I should have just stopped where I was. So this week I've knitted 4 squares, and these squares are actually knitted from the yarn that I picked up at Fibre East last year, so 2008. I'm behind on adding my squares on. So this one is a Paper Stories mini, and it's a beautiful grey with some pink speckles on there. Next we have a Beaker Button yarn, and this was a luxury blend, so I'm not quite sure what it was made of, but I think there might be a bit of silk in there, but it's a really nice yarn. This one, I'll have to look at my notes, is a Lowlands Legacy yarn that I picked up from Fibre East as well. And that's got some speckles of sort of amber and blue and pink in there. And I thought that that went really well with the square that was below it. And that was a Beehive Yarns one, if you're interested. The last square that I've been working on this week is from Sheep on Mars yarns. And like I said, these are all from Fibre East 2018. And there's 4 squares. And as you can see, I've started going in the other direction now. So I did 7 rows, I think, of going one way, 7 rows going the other, and now I'm starting to go the other way. So it's going to be like a chevron shape. And I'm just going to hold it up like that because I've got the needles attached to it at the moment. And I'll probably get in a right tangle if I try and hold the whole blanket up. Once I've got a finished square, I'll show you how it is looking as a whole. But there we are. As you can see, I don't know whether I've said about this on the last sort of podcast I showed the Cozy Memories blanket on, but what I'm trying to do is doing light dark so that I have a sort of checkerboard effect. Sometimes it's not as obvious, sort of this perhaps isn't as light as some of the other squares, and this one isn't as dark as some of the others, but I've tried to do it light and dark so that it gives a nice range of colours over there. That's my Cozy Memories blanket. I'm also knitting on my antler cardigan. Now, let's see if I can explain to you exactly what I've been doing with my boob pockets. So last week I showed you that I'd got it to the length that I wanted it, but I was working on some sort of short rows on the front of the garment so that it gives me more room for my bust area, and also decreases the stitch count so that it fits a little bit more snugly over the shoulders. Otherwise, sometimes if I knit everything just to fit around my bust, like this cardigan is, it sometimes is a little bit big on the shoulders. So what I did is I'd cast on the extra large. Let me get me pattern out. I think it was the extra large number of stitches for the body. Yes, so the extra large number of stitches for the body, and then I worked out by measuring my upper bust measurement up here that I could go down to the large size. I think I measured it as 43 inches, my upper bust measurement, and the large size chest fits 43 inches. So I then decided that I'd decrease from extra large to, no, from extra large to the large size. So Then I had to decide, so in terms of the length of the garment, on the front and the back, the front of the garment, if you've got quite a big bust, tends to be needs to be a little bit longer to be the same height. So if you measure from your mid shoulder point to your waistline at the front, and then the same at the back, you can tell how many inches difference there is between your front and the back, what that needs to be. So I need 3 inches of room extra on my front half compared to my back. So I then calculated how many stitches I needed to decrease on each side of my bust pockets and how deep these needed to be. So I need to be 3 inches, and I need to decrease 18 stitches on each side of the garment and to form like a dart shape. So then I decided I actually needed to decrease 2 stitches on every sort of knit side row on this side, so that I would knit, I think I ended up knitting 29 stitches, and then I did a slip slip knit and then passed them 2 slip stitches over and knit 1, and then purled back to the beginning of the row, and then I would do the same but knitted to the gap, slip slip knit, put those slip stitches over the knit one, so I was decreasing 2 stitches on every right side row. And then I kept working that because I worked out the gauge would be 3 inches if I did that over 9 repeats of those 2 rows, so 18 rows, I'd be decreasing 18 stitches. And then I knitted all the way around to the other side, and I basically did the same, but I had to do it on the purl side, the decreases. So I'd purl this way, slip slip purl, slip the 2 slip stitches over the purl stitch, and then purl 1, and then knitted back, and I'd repeat that, but purling to the gap, if that makes sense. It's similar to short rows on the heel, so that I had these little pockets. Now this is probably not the best, the neatest way of doing it, but I came up with the right depth here and the right number of decreased stitches, and I've sort of put it up against myself, and I think that'll fit really nicely once it's had a little bit of a block as well. So I've worked the cardigan bottom up, and I've done basically right to the armpits, and the instructions tell me that I need to knit the arms first before I carry on with the yoke bit, with the exciting bit. So my goal is next week to have at least done 1 full sleeve, well, up to the point where I join it to the body anyway. So that is my goal. You can hold me to it. And if I haven't done it, you can shout at me. Right, so I'm knitting this cardigan in my own hand-dyed yarn, and it's the colourway Living on a Prayer, but it's actually a new base that I haven't got in the shop yet. It's an Aran weight yarn, and it's 95% merino with 15% Donegal nep in there, and it gives a lovely texture with the little brown neps all over the cardigan. So hopefully definitely get a sleeve done by next week, and if I might even be able to get 2 sleeves done. That might be a bit too over enthusiastic. But we'll see, we'll see. Right, so that's my knitting works in progress, I think. Yeah, that's everything to do with knitting, but I have been doing a little bit of crochet. So I'd made up a little ball of scraps into a magic ball to add to my corner to corner crochet blanket. Now, the pattern that I'm using is taken from a Bella Coco video, which I will pop a link to in the show notes if you're interested in that. So the ball that I'd made up, and I think I might have shown it on the last podcast, but I finished that off. It's just going to get a bit harder to show how big this is now. It is getting quite wide. So I'm working, I want to get it so that it's basically the width or the length of my coffee table. That's my goal. So I keep measuring it on the coffee table, and then I'm going to start making it a rectangle shape. So I'm going to be keeping increasing on one side and then decreasing on the other, so you'll end up with a row that's the same length, and keep working that across until I get it to the length that I want it. But the colours that I've been using, I've tried to stick to the sort of mid-tones and lighter colours for this one, so that they sort of tone together quite well. But I am loving this texture. I keep saying this every time I show this blanket. I say, oh, gorgeous texture. It is lovely. I'm really enjoying that. So at the moment I've got one little scrap that I need to put in that I've got left over from my Cozy Members blanket. I'm trying not to use scraps that are too large on this because they can be used for other scrappy projects, which is probably a bit silly, especially since the rows on this blanket are quite long now. So maybe I should start putting some 10 gram minis in there, but anything less than 3 grams is going in this at the moment. And I am holding the scrappy yarn ball double with some plain undyed yarn in my merino nylon base. This is a 4-ply weight yarn, so that actually when I hold it double it's probably like DK weight. And I have some of this in my shop if you're interested in purchasing some undyed merino nylon yarn. Right, so that's my crochet. I'm very excited because I'm looking forward to casting on, or hooking on, if that makes sense, my Nature's Walk blanket, which is a beautiful pattern that's coming out by Sandra from Cherry Heart. She's going to have a crochet along starting on the 24th this month, so I'm very excited to be joining in with that. I have ordered a kit of the yarn, but it hasn't come yet. I'm so excited. I would have knitted a little test swatch to sort of start it off, but I haven't had my kit yet, so I'm very excited. Hopefully it comes today. Otherwise I'd have probably done about 6 of the test swatches. Because one of the squares has already been released. And there's a brilliant video that Sandra's done on her YouTube channel that discusses how you sort of go about reading a crochet chart. And I have worked from crochet charts before, but I listened to it anyway just to see if I could pick anything else up, and there was a couple of things that I found really interesting on there, so I do recommend that you go and have a look at Sandra's video on how to read charts, and it's basically to do with the test swatch for the Nature's Walk, so that's lovely. Right, so I have some sewing next. Now I'm one of the committee members for my local quilt group, and sometimes we like to make things for charity. Now we've got lots of strips that perhaps aren't very appropriate for children, you see, so we do a lot of linus quilts and things, but we've got a lot of sort of brown coloured strips that we thought, well, it's not very exciting to give to children, so we thought, why don't we make some little quilts up for some dogs, for the local dog charity. So in our group we've been piecing together these scrappy strips that we've got left over in our stash, and we've put those together, and then I've just made a small quilt to give to the dogs charity. Actually this other side is a little bit brighter, but just to make sure that we're not wasting all this lovely fabric that we've got, but also giving some back to the dogs as well. So this little small quilt, I've actually put some soft and bright wadding inside and just done some simple straight line quilting in the opposite direction to where the strips are, just to give it a bit of strength. And I've actually bagged out the corners instead of doing proper binding, and top stitched it closed so it's nice and secure, but that'll be nice for the dogs to have a sleep on. We're doing lots of different size ones because obviously dogs come in lots of shapes and sizes. We did contact our local dog charity to make sure what the guidelines they suggest for making things like this, and we've stuck to those rules, and our group is making a few of those, so thought I'd show you one of those that we're making up. Second on my sewing is my finished top that I showed you last week. So I didn't put it on Barbara because I wanted to show you how I'd finished off the inside. So this top I'd self-drafted, and I'd actually done this pattern by I learnt how to draft my own patterns by going on a course at Norwich City College, and they recommended us a book which I haven't got to hand at the moment, but I will put a link in the show notes to that, and it gives you detailed instructions of how to draw out a pattern so that it fits you. So I used binding to finish off the neck, round the sleeves and round the bottom of the top. I finished off all the interior seams with French seams because, French seams, so much fun. So, and also it gives such a nice finish as well. So all the insides are French seams, and then I've attached some coral binding, and this doesn't show on the bottom of the garment. I used, I think it was 1.5 inch binding, could have been 1 3/4 inch binding, and I actually repressed it so that it was just folded in half instead of folded into the centre, and then I stitched that along the edge, 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then it's been folded in and top stitched in place. Obviously I'd give it a press before I did that, and actually I did trim the seam allowance on the inside so it wasn't too bulky. And I found that actually if you top stitch on the inside of the garment along that binding, that gives a nice neat finish, and I love how you can get right to the edge there. You can get a nice neat finish. I did it round the neck in the opposite way so that you could see just a little bit of binding around the neck there to give it a little bit of detail. And again, I did the sleeves in the same way as I did the bottom of the garment so that the binding faces the inside. I did actually wear this last week to try it out, and I did find actually that perhaps I could do with taking it in about 1/2 inch just on the shoulders there, because they are a little bit wide for me. They're sort of sitting on the edge of my shoulder rather than just where your sort of shoulder bone is. So it's nearly there, my pattern, but I'm just going to make a couple of alterations. I might even undo the shoulders on this and just make the alterations on this top to make sure it's correct before I then alter my original pattern. But there we go. So this fabric I talked about on the podcast last week. I picked it up from a shop in Holt which is called Something Special, and they do lots of different fabrics, including quilting ones and a few dressmaking fabrics, as well as some yarns as well. So if you do go to Holt, pop in there. It's a lovely little shop. So that's my sewing for this week. And I have a bit of weaving. So we went to the Handmade and Creative Market, which was at Norfolk Showground in Norwich over the weekend, and it had a lovely range of different stalls. They had some yarns, they had some artists that had done some beautiful work, quite a few textile artists, some beading, some printing, some card making, some knitters. They had loads of lovely things to see. I only actually bought one thing, and it was a beautiful floral decoration that's like made of steel that you can put in the garden, and I'll pop a picture up of it here. It's in our garden in situ. I'm not bringing it in now because it's probably covered in mud and the base anyway. And this is the stall that I got it from, SJH Garden Metalcraft. And they had some beautiful flowery arrangements. So there's their contact details, but also if you look at the back of the card, they have an example of some other pieces that they've been working on. But I thought that was really beautiful to have in our garden, so I bought one of those. So again, we found another stall that actually sold sort of metalwork. They had some weather vanes there, but they also did some weaving little mini classes. So we all had a go. So we went along to the show with my friends Rob and Claire, and Adam came too. And we decided to do this class, and I've got a couple of pictures there of us having a go, having a bit of fun. But we decided to weave some baskets. So these are made out of, I think they're made out of a raffia or something like that. But I thought that would be really fun to have a go at, and also you can use it as a pen pot. So this is the one that I made, and Adam made a green one. Now I left the pieces of raffia sticking out where it needs to be trimmed so that Adam can actually finish this off, but I trimmed mine off this morning, so there is some excess raffia that needs trimming on Adam's. Adam did more of a straight weave, whereas I actually tried to flute mine out very slightly, very subtly there. You can just about see how it was working. And you could flute them out even more, and I suppose you could do lots of different shapes if you wanted to. So we started out with this wooden base that's had little holes in it, with pieces of raffia stuck into the base, and then we used the different coloured raffia to weave in and out there, and that, I think it probably took us about an hour. But obviously it was the first one that we'd done, so it probably took longer than it normally takes if you've got to grips with the technique. But that was great fun, actually, to be able to make something in an hour and be able to take something home as well. So next I have some confessions. Oh dear. So there was a fabric sale in my quilt group, and I don't need any fabric, but I happened to buy some. So there was a set of, I think these are 1/2 metre pieces of sort of checked fabrics that I thought would go together well. I actually picked up a fat quarter of a blue check at the quilt show in August. And I did mean to pick some fabrics that might go with it. And these actually I thought would go nicely together with that fat quarter I picked up. I don't actually know what I'm going to make out of it. But I like that sort of muted, sort of rustic look of those prints. So I picked those up. And then I saw this. Oh, I was thinking something Halloween-y that could be made out of this one. I think there's about 1/2 metre there. Don't know exactly what I'm going to do with it, but I probably shouldn't have bought it. And I bought a metre of this beautiful floral fabric. So, oh dear, so naughty. But it makes me happy, so that's all that matters. I've been interested in looking into how to make my own sanitary towels. Now, because it worries me so much of how much waste we put into landfill. And I think to start with, it sounds a little bit gross having reusable sanitary towels, but actually if you look into it a little bit more detail, there are ways of making it as sanitary as having ones that throw away. So I've been looking into the materials that you need, and I have purchased some Zorb fabric. Now, this Zorb fabric is a bit like a wadding, but it's extra absorbent, and you can use this for sanitary towels, and I think they use it for nappies as well sometimes. But I picked some of this up to try, and there are a number of ways that you can make the sanitary towels, and I have found a few videos that I found very useful on how to make those, and I'll pop those in the show notes. Especially one of the videos talked about actually using things that you've already got in your home, whether you don't actually necessarily need to buy things like Zorb, but you might need to layer things up so that there's more absorbency. Rather, this Zorb is made to just have one layer and that be enough, really. And she talks about how different sort of times you might need a thicker, more absorbent towel, and sometimes you might need a thinner one. So how to put materials together to get the same sort of absorbency, which I thought was quite interesting. Like I said, I'll leave the link to those tutorials in the show notes. And I will, once I've made some of these, I'll share some tips that I found as I go along. So hopefully get some of those made by next week. I now have some information on my shop update, but if you're not interested in that, thanks for watching. I'll see you next episode. But shop update, right, I'm not having a proper shop update this week, but I've decided to list some more of the yarn advent calendars, and I will be listing them, and they will definitely be taken off the website on Monday the 23rd of September at 12 noon, and that's GMT +1. So if you want one, make sure you get hold of one off the website this weekend. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the yarn advent calendars that I'll be doing. So I'm choosing all relatively sort of mid-tones and pale colours, just so that they tone together better. So if you're making a blanket or a pair of socks, these colours will go together relatively well compared to, you know, just random, all different shades of colours, brights and lights and whatever. They will be available in 10 grams and 20 gram sets, and you can also choose from the 12 days of Christmas to the 24 days advent calendars, so that you've got a good choice whether you've got a low budget or whether you just don't want too much yarn. So for example, if you bought 12 days of Christmas in the 10 gram minis, they'd be £30, and then it goes right up to £95 for the 24 days at 20 grams, if that makes sense. So they will be wrapped individually so that you can open them on each of the days of Advent or the 12 days of Christmas, or whenever you want to open them, really. And the theme is frost bites. So my idea is that they're little bites of yarn to warm you up on those frosty days. So there they are. They're available on my shop, crafthousemagik.co.uk, but they will only be available until Monday, so watch out for those. If you've already purchased an advent calendar, I'm planning on getting them shipped either at the very end of September or just at the beginning of October, depending on how long it takes me to pack them. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I'll see you next week. Bye!